decks we're going to be seeing. Looks like we are going to we've got Amulet Titan as we speak about it, and it's going to be off against Living End. What do you think of this matchup? Who do you think's favored game one?
So Living End is generally pretty heavily favored versus Amulet Titan. The key is that Amulet is a creature-based combo deck, and Living End's combo is a like Wrath of God based combo. When you cast Living End, it kills all of your opponent's creatures. So generally, the combo that kills all of your opponent's creatures is going to beat the creature-based deck. We also see a really key card in hand for our Living End player here in Subtlety. Subtlety is just one of those cards that Amulet like really struggles to beat. It doesn't matter if you have a Cavern of Souls, doesn't matter what else you do. When you cast your Titan, that turn, the Titan is not coming into play. And generally, you need it to come into play the turn you cast it because these games are so tight, and you will likely die the turn that you miss. The key card for Living End, other than Subtlety, is that really we want a Cascader that's not Shardless Agent. We want the Violent Outburst for that instant speed Wrath effect that will just like insulate you from getting tightened with, if Amulet puts an amulet or two amulets into play, Titan can just murder you, and having that instant speed effect is really important. Here we see Living End having done something like that it often does, which is grief early on and leave the opponent with kind of nothing that matters in the matchup.
Well, half the decks land as well, so you've only really got a 50% chance to actually hit a spell. Luckily, we did manage to hit the One Ring. I
Mhm.
always like the name that it's got called the One Ring, but we always have multiple copies of it in the decks. Urza Saga, pretty key in this matchup, though, right? Like that could be another way for us to kind of extend the game long, realistically make them fire off the Living Ends early, so we could end up finishing off with a big hasty Titan once one is resolved. Maybe we'll try and do it with a Dryad out and get the actual shooting damage from Valakut, not the combat damage from a Titan. But we'll find out. And the one thing I want to speak about on these Living End decks is because of Lord of the Rings. Obviously, that set was amazing for Modern. Obviously, Modern a plus legal. Is that now Living End can drop down to 15 lands in the main due to some of the new cyclers that it's picked up. Talk to me through that.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. You just have a higher density of cyclers in your deck. Your living ends are rarely small living ends that only put like 7 power into play. You generally get like, a bonus generous end as a 5/7, and it's really hard to not finish the game off in 1 to 2 attacks after casting a living end. I do want to point out an interesting play here. Our Amulet player has chosen to bounce their Urza Saga rather than let it hit chapter 3 and grab an amulet to kind of represent that quick. Having an amulet in play is way scarier than not having an amulet in play. But with no resources at all, it looks like the plan is to maybe make some constructs here and try to pressure a little bit and hope that the living end player just kind of has missed on Cascaders, but that's not the case. And Shardless Agent is just going to come down right here at sorcery speed, put a ton of power into play, and our amulet player with no amulet in hand uh, before this giant attack for over 20 damage is coming in is going to be really hard pressed to find a solution to this problem.
Yeah, 23 damage now on the board. Obviously, we can make a construct and kind of chump block one of these, but then how are we going to win the game from there? I was actually having a little look to see if there was a Bajuka bug in the main. There isn't. It's in the sideboard because we could have had the Urza Saga go fetch up a expedition map and then go
Mhm.
get the bug that way, but that is not the way that the cookie is crumbled. I'm pretty sure we're going to. Well, some of this pack does actually. I don't think. I think it's just the damage is done here, right? There's just too much damage coming across. Are we able to one shot next turn with? I suppose we do get an amulet off the saga that we
Yeah,
see.
a
With a,
single amulet is not going to do it here, and that would be the case even without this subtlety in hand. And that subtlety really keeps anything bad from happening.
all right, so we're fully locked up for game one. Obviously, this is open deck list for everybody just tuning in and just watching. Yes, there was all open deck list. Today is all open deck list, and especially when we get to that top 8. So no secrets here. Everybody knows what the opponent is playing. Here comes the construct token. We're just going through the motions because, of course, they don't know about the subtlety, right? They know it's in
Right.
the list, but they don't know it's in the hand. And realistically, if they can get an amulet off this saga, they top deck an amulet now. There's a shot that they can kind of win with the crackback. Oof, they drew the amulet as
They
well.
did draw the amulet.
Oh,
So
okay.
This is going to be one of the biggest roller coasters of emotions. This is one of the games where like you really wish you had some player face cams going on, because drawing
Yeah.
that amulet does mean that with no interaction from the living inside of the table from Arcaluna here, uh, this would this would definitely very easy to deal 12 damage from this spot. But with subtlety in hand as insurance, it's just not going to work out.
Nope, here comes the Summoners Pact. I wonder if there's any way that they can get around this. We obviously have access to their deck list, just like you do at home. Exclamation mark standings if you want to have a little look at what's going on. Colossus, no, nothing along these lines. We're just going to go for prime time. Hope for the best. If they've got it, they got me. We're going to go to a game number 2. If you don't, there's a good chance I can get across the finish line. Remember, there was 2 food tokens on the battlefield, so we are at 18 in life. But a double
And
striking Titan's pretty rough to deal with, right?
it is also an awkward spot. Resolving the Summoner's Pact, you know that you got through Force of Negation, which is the piece of interaction that generally is run in much higher numbers. Pretty rare to not see 4 copies of Force of Negation in the main deck. And then you have to also dodge the subtlety. There's only 2 copies of that in this list. So, you draw the amulet, big news. You get through Force of Negation. That's the second big news. And then you run into
Yeah.
the 2 of subtlety.
Sometimes, you take your blessings when you can get them, but unfortunately didn't pan out from then. Do things get better after sideboard though? Looking at we've got the amulet list on the screen for you. I see a couple of endurances and Paducah Bog. Is there anything else you'd like to bring in here?
I don't. I don't think that there's anything else that's going to be a big deal. If this were, we've seen some living end decks sideboard Blood Moon these days because it's actually, even though you are 3 or more colors, you have access to the land cyclers that make your mana base, pretty capable of fighting through Blood Moon. That's not a thing that this living end list is doing, so no need to bring in those generous ents. All the removal is pretty irrelevant. So really just bringing in those endurances and that Bajuka Bog, bring in that Graveyard Hate, and going to be really, really important actually. Pre-board, without having to think about endurance, you sort of can just play your stuff out as efficiently as possible and then cascade whenever you feel like it. That's very different post-board.
I suppose like you've also got they're probably bringing in their endurances and the Paducah Bogs, but that's going to deal with your side of the graveyard. We can still use Living End as a board sweeper if needs be, if something
Right.
like a Titan managed to come down. I do want to touch on the sideboard over on the Living End side, though, while we're kind of going through the first couple of turns, as we see Amulet and Vigor hit the battlefield, the powerful turn 1 play. They have Ley Lines of Sanctity in the sideboard, 4 copies of it. That in itself will turn off Endurance. That will also turn off Paducah Bog. Do you think they're worth bringing in, or is it just, I'm pretty sure my game plan's just going to beat theirs 9 out of 10 times?
I generally don't like to bring in Leyline of Sanctity. When I've had it in my sideboard, I've only really liked it in matchups where they both have some sort of hand disruption or something that it's turning off and endurances, or they're something like Burn, where the Leyline is a huge knockout punch. When they have, 2 copies of endurance and a Bajuka Bog that they can't even do at instant speed, and they have to just sort of do when they have the ability to just go grab it at sorcery speed, I don't think that it's worth having a bunch of Ley Lines of Sanctity in your deck. And you do have insulation against Endurance because this sideboard has 2 more copies of Subtlety, which is your main weapon against that effect.
We look like we can see a couple of sideboard cards now, Foundry Breaker and Force of Vigor. So really paying emphasis on, the fact that Amulet of Vigor is such a powerful card in their deck, as well as also it can hit Urza's Sagas and of course Dryad of the Elysian Grove.
Yep.
Be interested to see how we want to fire that off. This is quite a nice turn to Foundry Breaker.
Yeah, I would be pretty tempted to Foundation Breaker here because the other option is just to do a little bit of cycling, and you can only cycle your Generous End. You're not going to hit another cycler from there, and getting the Foundation Breaker in the graveyard can be really nice because then whenever you do Living End in the future, then it'll come up and kill an Urza Saga or another Amulet.
It looks like we're not worried about it too much just yet. We're going to go get ourselves a bit more land. The
Uh,
nice bit about this is we can get jewels, right?
Yes, can get duels, and importantly, land cycling this turn does guarantee that we have 3 mana next turn, so we can threaten the Cascader. But there was a forest in hand already, so that
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a concern. We do see that this is a deck that has Overgrown Tomb in it, and I believe a couple of Trolls of Khazad-dûm. So our Living End player has elected to put together a list where they can cast their griefs when the games kind of go long and grindy. And then we do see that Force of Vigor there taking out that amulet. So
Yeah, I
not
want you to talk me through that line. So we ditched the Foundry Breaker for to be in favor to cast the Force of Vigor just so we can cycle the end. Personally, I think I would have just cast it. Just cast it, get it out, get another 2 drop in my graveyard, keeping the Force of Vigor in hand in case as a Saga comes down, another Amulet comes down, or a Dryad potentially. What are your thoughts on firing off there? Is there a reason I'm missing there? Was it just the flavor of how you want to do it? They all kind of do the same thing, I guess.
yeah, I don't. So this puts the generous Ent in the graveyard, which makes this a much bigger living end. And so I think that this is just a statement like I would like to get this clock going. I want to get I'm going to kill your amulet anyways. I want to put this 5 power creature in the graveyard, and then I want to cast this shardless agent, put a big clock into play, bring back that generous Ent and the other
Oof.
creature in the graveyard,
And now we've
and
got a
then
stacker
hold up
going
subtlety.
on.
But
We've got this huge stack going on. So with the endurance coming down there, but no, we're going to use subtlety in response. And of course, the way that this blowout happens, that means the subtlety will then move to the graveyard
mhm.
and then living end resolve. So we also get an extra free fly to the battlefield. So yeah, maybe that as you said, that is this. They were trying to bait out potentially an early endurance because even just getting 10 power or 10, 12 power on the battlefield early could be enough just to fight your way through these last little points of damage.
Yeah, and with that amulet taken out, there aren't a lot of draws that do very much for our amulet opponent here. I mean, a land
Oh, they
an
pit it.
untapped land would allow the One Ring, and that's got to be the plan here is just kind of chain One Rings at this point, and 2 draw steps to make a mana here. Vesiva, unfortunately, not going to. Oh, but it copies a Crumbling Vestige, so that actually is perfect.
That's nice. That is really nice. I want to add that the subtlety put the Cascader back on top.
Yes.
They targeted their own Cascader, put it back on top. Just a little bit of insurance moving forward. Or they might put it to the bottom. We'll find out now. But no, they did put it to the top. By the
So
looks of
that's
it,
generally an interaction that is really important against the Rakdos deck for playing against Dothy Voidwalker because you often need to like living end and then they will use their Voidwalker to living end you back and then you get to your turn and then you can living end them back. That's a trick that I've used a number of times in that matchup. In this matchup, just drawing the Cascader off the top in this spot would not be particularly useful. And yeah, we just ended up in a spot where we've prioritized that early living end and kind of spewed interaction in order to get there. And now these rings, I think, are just going to carry the day.
I, all I'm saying is this is what I was speaking about with the Force of Vigor line. If we went to the line I went, we've still got a Force of Vigor now.
Hmm.
And now there's a Saga, there's another Amulet on the battlefield. I can also hard cast this
Right.
turn. But yeah, we'll see how it pans out. We do see a Summoners Pack, Dryad, and another Expedition map in hand. One ring might need to come down though, because there is 13 power currently on the battlefield. To see how we want to move forward as Expedition Mark and Dryad come down.
Yeah, I think you're kind of just comfortable taking this one hit because Living End doesn't have any burn, doesn't really have any reach, any way of like capitalizing off of that. So you can take the one hit, get your extra cards off of this, 3 cards from tapping the One
Oh,
Ring next turn and play another ring. The thing that would normally be a concern, which is getting your next ring Force of Negation, if our Amulet player has played this matchup a fair bit, will understand that generally Living End players are going to be taking out their forces in this matchup. It's just not very good, doesn't have good enough targets.
yeah, that makes sense. Foundry Breaker off the top. That's a good one. We can hit either Dryad, Saga, or the Amulet. Might even just hard cast it. Looks like that's the way we're going with it. 4 mana, casting a generic 2/2, but with an
Sure.
ETB of destroy target artifact or enchantment. What do you like targeting out of these options?
Probably it just has to be the Amulet here. And we don't know about the One Ring in our opponent's hand right now, so we
Mhm.
don't know that that is chaining off. We do know that our opponent is about to draw 3 cards off of this One Ring here, and with an Amulet in play, it's hard to imagine that you don't just die to that, or yeah, especially with you could kill this Dryad because then the Primeval Titan won't be able to Valakut you as easily, and with a
Also,
single Amulet, you don't die to combat damage. Uh,
You remember there's lack of green mana as well on the other side. So if a Titan did come off the top, they still need to be able to play a green source here. Obviously, lots of them in the deck, and there is a expedition map. So we tap two. No, we still got one
Yeah,
short.
I don't think that's going to be the problem here.
Nope, there's a rot farm off the top. Life is easy.
And with the Summoner's Pact in hand, Mycosynth Gardens can make another Amulet, but without the Dryad in play, there's no additional land drop for the turn.
So let's say we go Summoner's Pact here, Rot Farm Titan, Titan Haste. That's only 6 damage coming across with a backswing. I think we might be forced into this setting up for maybe potentially next turn.
I,
Maybe play the garden copy ring, something along those lines.
I think so. Yeah, the single Amulet, single Titan is not quite going to do the trick here. So I think the line is to fog and take another shot at it next turn, where this Urza Saga will have gotten a second Amulet. Maybe the Mycosynth Gardens can be a third Amulet, and you can just deal a bit, basically infinite damage at that point.
Yeah, it's so scary. We actually saw a turn 2 win the other night. I think it was on the Super League. We saw Canister throwing a turn 2 win out with like multiple lands with amulets going off. It was pretty cool to see, and they're the kind of the easy ones. It's in these complicated situations. This is where I think the real skill of amulet players comes out. But it looks like we are going to start going off with a Summoner's Pact. It's going to find itself a green creature, put it into hand. It is Primeval Titan. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe there's something we do not know.
Yeah, this is the part where you just sit back and relax and watch the Amulet player figure out the puzzle for you,
Well,
right?
I guess after this, if we don't, even if we don't give it haste, we can still have 4 mana up and just play the ring after this, and we've got a Titan for next turn.
That's very true. That's a very good point that we can do it all. I sometimes forget just how much mana the Amulet player ends up with.
And yeah, but I say we're going to have to do it because obviously we need to have double green in our upkeep, ready to pay for that new pack that's coming down. Here comes a hasty Titan. Not only does it have the ETB, it also has an attack trigger. We're going to go find 2 lands to put them into play tapped. This is where the Amulet Vigor really kind of shows its power and starts flexing its little 1 mana muscles. We're
Yeah,
going
and
to
this
go.
is the result of a game where I think that and I don't know if another line would have ultimately resulted in a better spot for our living end player, but it's to me I see a lot of this, which is people playing post board living end games as though they are game one living end games where just make the living end happen, get the creatures in play, it'll be powerful. But most post board games are going to uh, kind of turn themselves into a more mid-rangey, grindy sort of game where your plan A is not quite as powerful, and it's not necessarily because of sideboard cards that the Amulet player drew, but our Living End player had access to quite a bit of interaction and could have kind of shut down the power of the Amulet deck in a different way by making sure that Force of Vigor was actually killing 2 targets, by making the Foundation Breaker come back with a Living End and kill like an Urza Saga on the way in, and could have maybe really constrained our Amulet player's resources. And that wasn't the choice that the Living End player made. And now, this is a really rough spot. These creatures are not enough to beat, active Titan and Amulet in play.
So I'm trying to work out like like I love Amulet, and I love watching people go through this, and I love watching all the interactions that can happen. And right now in this situation, I'm sure there's a way they win. I just don't know how they win, especially paying. They got to pay for a pact in the upkeep. They've got an Urza Saga coming off. That's probably going to float mana. Go get an Amulet. Then then I'm like, right, now what do I do? How do I get another Titan coming down with the triggers? I've got the Slayer Stronghold in hand now. I need that realistic on the battlefield. Same with the Vesuva. It's going to be, this is what I love sitting back and watching these sort of games. Is just I'm learning every single time I get to do this.
Yeah, an interesting set of like bounce choices over there. Didn't end up with a bounce land in hand, although there is a Vesiva, so that works as a bounce land. So I guess uh, basically the world is Amulet's oyster in this spot. Uh, I think that any kind of decision chosen at random will get there here.
Is there a line that we should have cast the Shardless Agent that turn to get the current Titan off the battlefield? And I suppose
Possibly.
I
But
suppose
all
then a
that's
Dryad
doing
comes
is
back.
swapping their Primeval Titan for a Dryad,
Well, no, because
and
we got Foundation Breaker in graveyard, so
that's true.
I wonder if that is the line actually, because then we could have targeted at least either the Dryad or an Amulet. I don't know. Let's see how it pans out. It's the
N
beauty of Magic, right? It
no,
is.
I think you're right, and I think that's the only shot. I don't think you can let your opponent untap with Primeval Titan here. I just, like, can't imagine that this works out the way that you want it to.
It's a very brave thing saying the words "will." I think you're right. Like that's brave to go on that one. Normally, basically, just do the opposite of what I say, and you normally end up winning Magic. That's kind of how it all pans out. But we're all sitting in for the ride here at Free Life. Can we somehow close out this game with all this mana we've got, all these cards we've got in hand, all lands, I might add. Um,
Well, but
this,
that's what you love to see with Amulet. That's
yeah,
kind of what you
that's what I
want in a
mean.
lot of spots. There, one of the lands is Teleria West, and so that gives a lot of access to different lines.
It's going to be one of them where it's like, now, okay, we're going to sit here for 5 minutes thinking, and then it will take about 60 seconds to win the game. But we've got to
Well,
work out the line. We've got to find what I need to do and sequence it properly, right?
and I think what the main thing that our Amulet player is thinking about is how do I beat subtlety in this spot? Because passing the turn here, 4 mana up, no, no ability to deal damage on that turn, and did not cast a Cascader or anything, but does have that key like blue 2 up for subtlety, which will stop like a single Primeval Titan. So you don't want to just run into that and leave yourself dead. And I'm not sure exactly what the out is against subtlety. So with one Teleria West in hand, that represents like a Summoner's Pact and a cast of a Titan. With an attack from the Titan, you could pick up that Teleria West and get another one potentially, especially if Mycosynth Gardens is copying Amulet of Vigor. But subtlety definitely makes it tougher to do what you want to do.
Yeah. So I think the way that it's going to line up for them is they're working out is, how do I play around subtlety? Can I play around subtlety? I think they're going to work out they can't play around subtlety. So then it's okay, right? How do I win this turn? Also got to remember there's a lot of creatures on the other side. That's a lot of chump blockers. And we don't mind chump blocking. What are you gonna do? Pick my cards in my graveyard? Sure, I don't care about that. I'll get them back out next turn. We can soak up 7, 10, 15 points of damage this way. So maybe we're trying to work out a line of multiple Titans plus Dryadon, and then if that's the line we're thinking of. Okay, what about if there's Force of Vigors going on the other side? A lot to think and work about here, especially for Sim Visions being a game down. Remember, trying to level it up to get themselves into a game number 3, so both of these players can advance to an 8-0 record. Remember, 10 rounds of modern action. We're starting today on round number 8, so 3 more rounds today, and then we're going to bring you that top 8, where we're going to send 2 players to the end of year championship event. They're going to join the other 48 players and battle out for $25,000. Not bad for a free tournament, right, Chris?
No, no, not bad at all. I, have a little bit of FOMO myself for not playing in this one this weekend, but getting to sit here with you and watch these is a good consolation prize for missing out on that.
Yeah, I much rather casting events these days than going O2 drop. It's a lot more fun. You know what I mean? Infect isn't where it used to be. RIP. We had
I am still an active tournament player myself, but I do enjoy this process very much.
Yeah, well, I say humble brags. I did qualify for the next RC that modern one. My first tournament I played, I managed to get the one shot, get in there a bit of Yawgmoth.
That's how
One
you
of
want
my
to do it. Very efficient.
But normally it takes me a whole season. I'll get in one of the last ones, play like 8 or 9, and then the last one's the ones I kind of scrape in. But this time, one and done, I'll take it all day long. Gives me more time to be able to cast. So now we're going to go through the motions of how we're going to win this game. So we've got Vesuvius going to copy the Simic chamber. Then we're going to use Taylor West with the mana floating, and we're going to go Summoner's Pack. Summoner's Pack for Dryad. We're going to cast the Dryad now.
Hmm.
That hits the battlefield. 4 mana floating plus another land drop if we want it. I'm not sure. I don't know. Does Slayer Stronghold have to be on the battlefield for this to work?
Well,
Do
so and now I think that Serum Visions has realized that they bounced a land that they didn't mean to bounce here, because there's no bounce land left in hand now. There's another land drop, 2 amulets in play, but the One Ring just hits Valakut here, which is not a bad hit. That's gonna just
Well,
deal damage to face, and then any land drops after this are going to, deal an enormous amount of damage. And the draw from the One Ring there was a copy of the One Ring and a copy of Valakut, which are kind of like exactly what you want. Uh, I don't know that this line.
we could get another Valakut here,
Yeah,
right?
we can
So
get plenty of stuff. I guess there's with the Titan attack. Like it's all lethal as long as the creature from the Summoner's Pact resolved, kind of regardless of what it was. So it's all good here.
it's all gravy. We're going to potentially get ourselves a game number three. We've seen some crazy games of Magic happen so far this weekend. If you didn't check them out, make sure you go and watch the VODs after this stream is over. Because I promise you, yesterday we were in a state. It's like we wrote the script of okay, how can we have an amazing back and forth game of Magic, and we had multiple of them yesterday, and that's just why we love watching the modern format in its entirety. Arguably the second most popular format in Magic. Obviously, the casuals have the crown on that one with EDH, but in competitive Magic, I'm pretty sure we would call this the most popular. Here comes two land drops. It is going to be a second Valakut. That's going to mean 12 damage going to the face, and we will get a game number three.
Yeah, without actually having subtlety in hand, basically any line from Serum Visions was going to deal an enormous amount of damage this turn, and did not fail to deliver there.
I'm also going to throw it out here, by the way. If I did bring in my Leylands of Subtlety, they couldn't have targeted me with the Valakut. Don't want to brag. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
don't know
that's
if it's
quite.
quite,
The
it's
goal
very
is to
niche.
stop the Titan from happening. The goal is to not allow Valakut triggers to go on the stack generally. The thing about Leyline of Sanctity protecting you from Valakut triggers is those triggers can still target your creatures, which generally is going to be fine in that spot.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. Well, with the speed of sideboarding there, I'm going to say that both players just went, yep, accept, resubmit, and we're going to be better off for a game in number three.
Yeah, great hand from our living end player here. This is, early cyclers. We've got the best cascader in Violent Outburst. We've got subtlety to either protect against endurance or to stop an early Titan. And really just kind of everything you can ask for. Also Foundation Breaker if there's an early Amulet or an Urza, God forbid, an Urza Saga, you just get to take it out. So this is almost the perfect hand for living end.
Did you have you ever like cast Force of Vigor into your amulet opponent going turn one as a saga into with a turn one amulet?
Uh,
It's beautiful.
It is really something. The other trick with the Force of Vigor is to respond to the chapter 1 of the Urza Saga so they don't even get a mana out of their land drop for the turn. There's a lot of gnarly stuff you can do with the Force of Vigor.
Yeah, like I only actually learned that interaction recently that the saga is actually a trigger for it to be able to tap for mana. I was like, oh, so I could get rid of it before they even get the mana from it? That's pretty sick.
Yes.
Mainly I learned that because I got blown out by it. I was like, oh,
That's
what?
how you
No.
learn most of the tricks in Magic, I think. It's a
It,
valuable part of the experience. So we are
it,
going to probably see this Foundation Breaker taking out this Urza Saga, which on the play, just getting the Stone Rain effect here is so brutal.
yeah, it's so sweet. And yeah, you're exactly right. ETB, destroy that as a saga. No more mana for you or constructs. Because that's like the hidden mode of saga, right? In this deck is okay, right, you're gonna kind of subtlety me out the way. Well, you can't subtlety all these constructs that are gonna be coming down. I do think, as we spoke about just before we started, that Living End is pretty favored in this matchup. Like, I think it's better after Cyborg, but the ability to instant speed wrath your opponent, plus all this other extra interaction that we kind of bring in that still goes to our game plan, it is pretty rough. But then we saw
Honestly, I
in
would
game
say the
number two.
matchup gets even worse for Amulet after sideboard because
Ooh,
the interaction that Living End is playing is just more targeted to it. Bringing in Force of Vigors and subtleties, going up to like a full play set of subtleties is a really big upgrade to the deck in a way that just having a couple of endurances doesn't really give you game against Living End.
I want to do a big shout out to chat. Man, there is a time delay from what we're actually casting until you get to see it. So that's why we can't interact with you too much in the chat. We'll just be typing in there, interacting with you all. But welcome, good morning. Thanks for tuning in and joining us today. Hope you're having a good. I've just seen Spider Space jumping in. I believe he's playing in the tournament as well today. He's having a pretty good run. I think he was X and one actually going into day two.
Yeah, we've seen in the past when I've covered, in the long, long ago when I covered Manatraders tournaments before, we saw Gabriel have quite a bit of success, including with some like pretty funky Death and Taxes builds in Modern that I enjoyed watching a lot.
Yeah, he's holding on to that death and taxes the way I'm holding on to Infect. It's
Yes.
just let it go. Yeah, but I think he's playing a spicy Grixis list this weekend. Actually, I
Ooh,
also had the
fancy.
pleasure of meeting him at Pro Tour Barcelona. Obviously, I don't get to see everybody in America as much because I'm over here in England, so I don't get to see people in Europe. But now we're in our own little island. But it's really nice when I get to see people that I've been interacting with for years, and you get to meet them and hang out. And I love the gathering part of Magic the Gathering as well as watching high stakes tournament like we are doing here as we shock in this stomping ground, giving us access to our third man, and we all know that means there's trouble coming.
Yeah, so a couple different options here. Depending kind of because everything is instant speed, this is where Violent Outburst, like the quality of that card versus Shardless Agent in this type of matchup really shines through. You just get to pass with all of your mana up. You can cycle at instant speed. You have access to subtlety. Like a Violent Outburst here is just casting a Living End and getting 5 power in play could kill this amulet in response to this Mycosynth Garden trigger or Mycosynth Garden activation by casting Living End, bringing back that Foundation Breaker, but that's really not as much power as we're hoping for. And with this subtlety in hand, even having a second amulet is not the scariest thing. We can stop a Titan.
Yeah, we can stop the first one. I like doing the Waker Waves here. Maybe Sidewinder, get them both in the graveyard potentially. There's not a crazy line here to win, is there? If we get double mana, we can go double mana. We can get 8 mana on then we can summon this pack. Oh my, we might be looking at just a straight up potential win here. Obviously, Violent Outburst of Subtlety are going to cause problems in this, but we weren't expecting that this turn. Just looking at these hands, but that's the power of this deck.
Well, yeah, this is a really strong draw from Amulet, kind of the naked, like I have multiple amulets and a bunch of land drops. I can do my thing here. And, really powerful draw, but no protection in any way from what Living End is able to do to stop it, whether that's just violent outbursting once, with a bounce land trigger on the stack to take the Azusa out and deny additional land drops and keep the amulet deck from being able to have 6 mana on its turn, or just have the card subtlety in hand to eat up the whole turn and then wrath away the Azusa and kill one of the amulets and leave almost nothing.
I
Looks like
was
we're choosing to subtlety the Azusa, though.
Yeah, I was about to say this is actually a really interesting line because if the Azusa comes down and lands, even if we've essentially think we could get a Titan, we could use 2 mana from the bounce land, crack the map Bajuga Bog, and exile the graveyard. And then none of that, all that comes
Mm,
underneath subtlety. So maybe that's the line of thinking here. So firing off the subtlety now, I quite like this line actually. Now we spoke through it.
yeah, I think that is a really good line. We know that one of the cards in hand is the Simic Growth Chamber. So there's a little bit of a risk here to this next turn where the hand is great. We've got Grief You, cast a Living End wrapped up. The kind of risk is that if I Grief You and your only spell is Primeval Titan, I have to take that and put it into the graveyard, which means that a Living End isn't the best cast if
Yeah.
it's putting a Primeval Titan with 2 Amulets of Vigor in play onto the battlefield. At least it's a violent outburst, so maybe you could end step it. So it would be interesting to see if we choose to grief here before casting this violent outburst, or if we just pass the turn.
I'm going to ask production if they can find out if that was put back on top or bottom of the library because that's pretty relevant. It was on the bottom. Okay, so they put it to the bottom of the library, so they're not thinking that they're going to try and set up that turn there. They think they've got the tools in hand with the Sinner's Grief plus Summoner's Packs, but we now know that this grief is coming down. It is going to take that Summoner's Pack cleanly out of the hand. There's no
Hmm.
line here where you'd Summoner's Pact for no, we don't have the mana. I was about to say it's like Summoner's Pact for an endurance and just pay for it in upkeep. But with just 2 mana on the battlefield, we cannot do that. We're gonna have to take the hit from this violent outburst, which I imagine is gonna happen in upkeep or draw step potentially, so we can use the Grief's ability to have a little look. Remember, there's also a Foundry Breaker in there. Okay, this is gonna go pretty bad. This is this
Yeah,
this
it's
is
it's
all
pretty
sorts of bad.
brutal. I think draw step is pretty fair because there can't be an endurance cast. We know that there's no green card in hand to pitch, so you don't need to worry about anything on draw step. And I think that's what we're considering here is like if we go to draw step, is there anything that can blow me out here? No, so I might as well wait until then.
Yeah, makes complete sense. I remember open deck list throughout today, all the way through to the top 8, where we were battling out to send 2 players to the Players Championship. $25,000 on the line. What's the most you've ever played for? What's the biggest tournament you ever played for?
I mean, I've played open. I've played a couple open top eights, so those were probably my most on the line in a particular match of Magic. But yeah, a small invite only $25,000 tournament. Those stakes are nice.
And that's going to be enough for us to scoop it up. Here's the Vine out.